Imagine waking up to the sound of church bells at dawn, your body aching from a night on a straw-filled mattress crawling with fleas. Your breakfast? A bowl of cold pottage and stale bread that could break your teeth. Welcome to a day in the life of a medieval peasant where every moment is a battle against hunger, filth, and exhaustion. Could you survive without modern comforts? Let's step into their shoes and find out. You wake before dawn to the stench of damp straw and animal waste. The smell clings to your clothes, your skin, the very air you breathe. Your bed is little more than a pile of musty straw in the corner of a single cramped room home to your entire family, possibly a few chickens and their droppings. No cozy mattress supports your back. Instead, lumps of uneven straw jab into your ribs while cold drafts slip through gaps in the wattleland daub walls. Every joint aches from lying on the hard-packed dirt floor. While scratch blankets are your only cover soaked with sweat, never washed, crawling with fleas that nip at your skin. Privacy doesn't exist here. Your parents, siblings, grandparents, everyone sleeps shoulder to shoulder. There are no walls dividing beds, no doors to shut out the sounds of snoring or restless livestock. Someone always coughs in the dark. The stink of unwashed bodies mixes with damp earth and animal musk. Morning doesn't mean a trip to the bathroom because bathrooms don't exist. No sink to splash water on your face, no toothbrush to scrape off the sour taste of sleep. Your teeth feel fuzzy, your mouth thick with last night's beer. You might rub them with a finger if you're feeling fancy. Your wool tunic stiff with sweat and dirt chafes as you pull it back on. It hasn't been washed in months because laundry means hauling water from the well, scrubbing by hand with lye soap that eats at skin as much as grime. Fleas already jump from the straw to nestle back into the fabric against your body. As daylight leaks through cracks in the walls, you glance at the cold hearth. No modern comforts here, same as yesterday, same as tomorrow. Privacy was a luxury, comfort a myth. And breakfast? That won't be any better. Your stomach growls, but breakfast isn't coming to save it. That hollow feeling won't go away today or any day. You reach for yesterday's loaf, rock hard now because proper ovens were for bakeries, not peasant homes. The crust could chip a tooth if you bite wrong. You dunk it in weak beer instead your daily drink since water from the village well might give you dysentery. The beer isn't the rich, frothy kind lords enjoy. It's thin, sour, and warm, brewed from whatever grain was left after taxes. No hops, no spices. Just enough alcohol to kill some bacteria, though not enough to make the taste better. Beside it sits a bowl of pottage, the same as yesterday. A gray sludge of boiled grains, maybe a few peas or turnips if it's a good week. No salt. No butter. You scrape the wooden bowl clean because wasting food isn't an option when winter's coming. Meat. Forget it. Livestock was too valuable to slaughter unless a lord demanded it for his table. On feast days, you might get a shred of salted pork if you were lucky. Fresh fruit was equally rare. Orchards belonged to monasteries or manors, not peasants. Even honey was taxed. Your teeth ache from grit in the bread, your guts cramp from fiber with no fat to ease digestion. A child whines nearby, spooning lumpy pottage into their mouth. They're already stunted from years of this diet, knobbly wrists, a belly swollen from malnutrition. Across the village, servants in the manor house feast on spiced meats, white bread, and wine. The smell wafts through open windows during summer, mocking you as you chew another tasteless mouthful. Your body shows the toll. Muscles waste without enough protein. Wounds heal slower. Winter will be worse months of shriveled tubers and moldy stored grains. Some mornings, you wake dizzy from hunger, barely able to stand before another day of labor. Farmers have been jailed for stealing a handful of grain to feed their families. Starvation was punishment enough. You swallow the last bitter sip of beer, the liquid doing nothing to wash away the gritty feeling in your teeth. Food wasn't for pleasure in the Middle Ages, it was pure survival, and you were always one bad harvest away from famine. Now, it's time to work it all off under the eye of the Lord Steward, who won't accept hunger as an excuse for slackness. The church bell tolls. Time to bend your back in the fields where the real torment begins. At least the sweat will distract you from the gnawing in your gut. That ache won't fade until evening, when you'll face the same sparse meal all over again. Between the hunger and the coming labor, there's no time to think about your next problem where to relieve yourself in a village with no toilets worth the name. But that horror's coming right after the first hour of plowing when nature inevitably calls. That urgent pressure in your gut isn't going away. You scan the single-room hut, no chamber pot in sight. Your family uses the same corner bucket as everyone else, if you're lucky. At night, it sits by the bed, reeking of ammonia until morning when someone dumps it outside, usually near the vegetable patch where human waste fertilizes next year's meager crops. Right now, though, you've got to go, and the fields are calling for work. Outside, the village reeks worse than your hut. Pigs root through piles of rotting food scraps and human excrement dumped directly onto the dirt paths between homes. There's no sewage system, no running water to wash anything away. Waste sits until rain eventually washes it toward the same stream where women fill buckets for cooking and drinking later. Flies swarm thick over every pile, landing on food, faces, open sores. You find a spot behind the pig shed, trying to ignore the stench as you hitch up your tunic. No toilet paper exists here, just a handful of straw if you remembered to grab some, or a broadleaf if it's spring. Most days, you use your left hand and wipe it clean on the grass. The concept of germs hasn't occurred to anyone yet, though the constant waves of dysentery should have been a clue. Even villagers who survive into their 40s have teeth rotting from chronic diarrhea. Over in the manor house, the lord might have a garderobe closet with a hole that drops waste straight into the moat below. That privilege doesn't extend to commoners. Public latrines exist in some towns, basically just planks with holes dangling over rivers that double as drinking water sources. Epidemics spread like wildfire under these conditions. When the Black Death comes knocking, entire villages will vanish in weeks. Back at your hut, you pump your fist underwater from the communal trough. The water's murky today, flecked with who knows what debris. There's no soap that's for laundering clothes on rare occasions, not daily hand washing. You dry your hands on your filthy tunic, already stiff with old sweat. Nearby, a neighbor empties his night soil bucket directly onto the cabbage patch. Children play barefoot in the muck, their legs spotted with sores from filth-borne parasites. Open wounds fester quickly in this environment. Even minor cuts swell with infection when coated daily in human and animal waste. The village midwife swears by poultices of moldy bread for such wounds when she isn't busy delivering babies on dirt floors strewn with soiled straw. Across the lane, old Thomas coughs violently into his sleeve. Consumption, probably ever present in cramped hovels where damp air breeds lung ailments. His phlegm will dry in the sun, then blow around with the dust everyone breathes. His family shares one blanket, one cup, and soon enough, they'll catch whatever's killing him. Chamber pots sometimes spill during the night. You wake two cold liquids seeping through the straw you sleep on. No one changes it out except in spring planting season when fresh straw is plentiful. The rest of the year, you let it dry and try not to think about what you're inhaling all night. Washing your whole body. Forget it. Full baths might happen once or twice a year, usually before major holidays. Even then, you share the same wooden tub with multiple family members, scooping murky water over yourself until the next person climbs in. No shampoo, no soap worth the name, just lime mixtures that strip skin raw. Between baths, you clean yourself by rubbing down with linen scraps that just redistribute grime. Your underarms reek by noon, your crotch itches constantly. Will tunics trap sweat and bacteria against your skin for months without washing? Layers of dirt actually help somewhat. They form a protective coating against the lice that nest in your seams. Scratching is second nature, as habitual as breathing. Privacy during bodily functions is non-existent. In the fields, entire work crews squat together in open ditches when nature calls. At home, relatives barely turn away while relieving themselves. Every cough, belch, and bodily noise happens in full view, no closed doors to muffle the symphony of human biology. The concept of cleanliness we know today simply didn't exist. Water was for drinking when bear ran low, not wasting on frivolous washing. You go weeks without seeing your own skin beneath the layers of dirt ground into every pore. Scrubbing too hard risks opening sores that'll inevitably become infected. As you trudge toward the fields, you step carefully around the freshest piles. Dogs lick at them while children chase each other through the sludge. Everything smells like decay because it is decaying. Food scraps, animal carcasses, human waste, it all rots together until rain washes it into the groundwater supply. Your barefoot squelches into something warm and soft. Didn't see that one in the pre-dawn gloom. You scrape your heel against a rock, but the stain remains. It'll dry by midday, just another layer joining the accumulated filth of weeks past. Cleanliness was impossible. Disease was inevitable. And somehow expecting you to labor efficiently through this squalor. You pull your wool tunic over crumpled linen underclothes that haven't been changed in weeks. The fabric scrapes against skin already raw from constant scratching. Medieval fashion isn't about style, it's about enduring the elements with whatever ragged layers you can cobble together. Your main garment is a knee-length wool tunic, roughly sewn by your wife or mother. No buttons or zippers exist, just laces at the throat and a belt at the waist. The wool isn't the soft merino we know today, it's coarse, stiff, and stiffens further when sweat and dirt accumulate. There's no dye peasants wear the natural gray-brown of an-eyed sheep's wool. Only the wealthy wear bright colors from expensive imported dyes. Underneath, you have a linen shift, if you're lucky, a simple sack-like shirt that rarely gets washed properly. No underwear exists as we know it. Men go commando beneath their tunics. Women might wear a linen bandeau if they can spare the cloth. Everything itches constantly. Your clothes never really dry out fully. Morning dew soaks your hem as you walk through fields. Summer's sweat dampens the fabric against your back. Winter turns damp wool into an icy second skin that leaches body heat. Rain transforms your entire outfit into a soggy, stinking weight that drags with every step. Laundry happens maybe twice a year. The process takes an entire day, hauling water from the well, heating pans over the fire, scrubbing with harsh lye soap that turns hands red and cracked. Clothes fade and fray faster with each washing, so people wear them until they literally rot off their bodies. The smell becomes part of you, an acrid mix of sweat, wood smoke, and the distinct tang of unwashed wool that's absorbed years of labor. Lice and fleas thrive in these conditions. They nest in seams, lay eggs in the fibers, and crawl across your skin day and night. You develop a habitual scratch, palms rubbing over arms, fingernails digging into your scalp. Small red bites dot every inch of exposed skin. At night, you can feel them moving through the straw mattress, seeking warmth. Footwear barely qualifies as shoes, just thin leather wrapped around the foot and tied with cords. The soles wear through within months, letting in mud, snow, and sharp stones. Many go barefoot to save their only pair for church visits. Feet develop calluses thick enough to walk on gravel, but frostbite still claims toes every winter. Children wear miniature versions of adult clothes, tiny tunics that flap around skinny legs. Their woolen hose if they have any droop without garters to hold them up. Every garment gets handed down through multiple siblings until it's more patched than original fabric. Babies are simply swaddled in strips of linen that double as diapers, rarely changed, always damp. Coming in from the fields, soaked forces you to dry clothes on your body standing near the fire while steam rises off your tunic in wisps. The heat bakes in the odors instead of removing them. Smoke from the hearth stains clothes with a permanent gray tint that blends with the dirt. Women's clothing offers no practical advantages either. Long skirts drag through mud and filth, soaking up village grime. Aprons help somewhat thicker layers to wipe hands on, something to hitch up when kneeling in dirt. Headscarves keep lice slightly more contained, but also trap sweat and heat in summer. Jewelry doesn't exist for peasants. No buckles, no decorative stitching, just plain functionality overriding everything. Wealthy ladies wear elaborate headdresses and brooches while you make do with a scrap of leather to tie back your hair. Even that gets borrowed by your husband when his own thong snaps. Winter brings extra layers if you have them. Multiple tunics get worn at once, sleeves stuffed with straw for insulation. Mittens are rare luxuries. Most wrap hands in strips of cloth that quickly become sodden. Woolen caps freeze stiff overnight, requiring a few minutes near the fire to become pliable enough to wear again. Clothing literally wears you down. The constant friction creates rashes and sores that refuse to heal. Collars chafe necks raw. Rough seams leave red lines across shoulders after a day hauling firewood. Tattered edges catch on tools or doorways, tearing further with each snag. When garments finally disintegrate past usability, nothing gets wasted. Rags become kindling, mattress stuffing, or bandages. Even the smallest linen scraps get saved for menstrual pads or wound dressings. A single garment might serve multiple purposes across decades before its threads return to the earth. Modern fabric softeners would seem like witchcraft here. Clothing demands endurance, not comfort. The wealthy might line their cloaks with rabbit fur or wear silk undergarments, but you don't have that option. You buttonhole the last lace on your tunic with cracked fingertips. Fashion was the least of their worries. The sun's fully up now, which means the steward will be watching for slackers. No time to dwell on discomfort not when the fields demand labor from dawn till dusk. You grab your wooden rake, already splintered from years of use, and step out into the muck, bare feet sinking slightly into mud coagulated with yesterday's refuse. Those turnips won't plant themselves before noon. And blisters. Field work deals those out daily without remorse. The sun clears the tree line as you trudge toward the fields, your breath fogging in the chilly morning air. The workday began at first light and won't end until dark. No clocks measure the hours, just the slow arc of the sun across the sky. Your hands already throb in anticipation of what's coming. Peasant farming isn't picturesque pastoral labor, it's relentless, body-breaking toil from adolescence until death. Your main tool is a heavy wooden plow pulled by an ox if your village is fortunate enough to have one. If not, you and your neighbors become the draft animals, harnessed together with ropes to drag the iron-tipped implement through unyielding soil. The plow weighs more than a child, and after 6 hours of dragging it across rocky earth, your shoulders burn as if pressed against hot coals. Planting is no better. You move in a perpetual crouch across acres of turned earth, dropping seeds into shallow furrows. Your knees pop with each squat, your lower back tightening into a permanent ache. The work requires both hands, one to part the soil, the other to place the seed, so when flies swarm your face or sweat drips into your eyes, you have no way to brush them away. You learn to blink rapidly, shake your head like an animal, anything to keep working without breaking rhythm. The steward watches from the edge of the field, his riding crop tapping impatiently against his boot. Slackers get beaten. Slow workers get their rations cut. Last autumn, a man collapsed mid-furrow heat stroke, probably, and was dragged to the stocks for wasting daylight. His family went hungry for a week as punishment. You force your legs to keep moving, your hands to keep grasping. Harvest time multiplies the misery. Sickles must slice through stiff stalks hour after hour, their wooden handles rubbing palms raw until blisters burst and reform as calluses. Strawdust coats your throat, mixing with sweat to form a gritty paste on your skin. Grain spills attract rats that skitter across your feet as you work, occasionally bold enough to nibble at the leather of your shoes. Every sheaf you bind feels heavier than the last, but the wagon won't be full until dusk. The oxen fare better than you, they get regular water breaks and rest periods. Peasants don't. When you straighten up to ease your aching back, the steward barks at you to keep working. Your only respite comes when clouds block the sun for a few merciful minutes. Rain means labor continues, just with added mud soaking through your shoes and weighing down your tunic. Children work alongside adults from about age 7. They scare birds from newly planted fields, collect stones that could damage plows, and fetch water in buckets nearly as heavy as they are. By 12, they wield full-size tools alongside their parents. No schooling, no playtime, just a lifetime of labor starting before their bones finish growing. A hunched posture becomes permanent by 30. Your hands tell the story, fingers permanently bent from gripping tools, nails cracked and blackened with dirt that never fully washes out. Scar tissue webs across your palms where blades slipped during harvests past. Arthritic knuckles swell during winter, making spring planting agony until the joints warm up. Bare feet spread wide from decades of gripping uneven ground, toes splayed like roots seeking purchase. Even the rhythm of work offers no escape. Songs help pass time in some villages, but yours has a steward who considers singing a distraction. Silence stretches between the grunts of laborers and the occasional snap of the steward's crop against someone's back. The monotony becomes its own torture, same motion, same field, same pain, sunrise to sunset. The sun reaches its zenith, but there's no lunch break. You're permitted to chew on whatever bread you brought from home while walking behind the plow. Bites get spaced out carefully. Too much at once means running out before sundown. Your stomach growls, but stopping to eat properly would mean losing a portion of tonight's already meager meal back at the manor. Occasionally, injuries happen. A misstep while swinging a sickle sends the blade into your shin. The wound barely bleeds through the dirt caked on your skin. When it festers tomorrow, you'll clean it with vinegar if you have any, otherwise with stale urine. Some years, tetanus claims a villager after such minor cuts, their jaw locking shut before slow suffocation sets in. You hope this scratch won't be your end. The steward starts counting sheaves as shadows lengthen. Your arms tremble with exhaustion, but you force them to keep lifting, bundling, tossing. Falling short of the daily quota means punishment, extra work tomorrow, or perhaps a night in the stocks. Your shoulders burn as if molten lead has been poured between the bones. Still, you stack sheaves until your vision blurs. Evening brings no real rest. After the fields, there's firewood to chop, animals to feed, tools to mend. Your wife greets you with a bowl of the same thin pottage you ate this morning. There won't be more until tomorrow. You fall onto the straw pallet, fully clothed, too exhausted to remove your sweat-stiffened tunic. Every muscle protests when you shift positions, but you must sleep. Dawn comes early, and the steward won't accept fatigue as an excuse. Tomorrow will be identical, same labor, same aches, same gnawing hunger. Next week, next month, next year. Records suggest medieval peasants worked about 150 days per year for their lords, but that doesn't count the endless work simply to keep your own family alive. Clearing new land, repairing your hut, grinding grain, all these happen during supposed rest periods. The church promises heavenly rest for the righteous, but that's cold comfort when your hands won't unclench from the morning's labor as you try to sleep. Your body becomes a catalog of occupational hazards, knees ruined by kneeling in damp fields, lungs scarred from grain dust, spine twisted from uneven loads. Some days you envy the elderly beggars at the church door, at least their suffering seems less monotonous. Chronic malnutrition makes everything harder. Weak muscles fail faster. Wounds heal slower. The fatigue never lifts even after the rare full night's sleep. You're not starving, not quite, but the constant calorie deficit leaves you light-headed by midday. Every task requires more effort than it should, like wading through thigh-deep mud even on dry land. Noise from the manor house drifts over the fields, laughter and harp music signaling yet another feast for the Lord's household. The smell of roasting meat makes your stomach cramp. You'll see none of that food, though your labor helped produce it. Somewhere in that stone hall, a well-fed steward is marking tomorrow's quotas on a wax tablet, ensuring another sunrise to sunset cycle of toil. Rest was a luxury, exhaustion was constant. And tomorrow brings fresh torment, not just labor, but the ever-present risk of injury or illness that could render you unable to work at all. One bad fall, one infected cut, one winter fever, that's all it takes to tumble from grinding poverty into outright catastrophe. The scratch in your throat isn't just dryness, it's the first warning. By nightfall, sweat soaks your tunic despite the autumn chill. Your muscles ache in ways field work never caused. This isn't fatigue, it's fever. And in your world, fever means dice are rolling against your life. Medieval medicine understands almost nothing correctly. Physicians train from ancient Greek texts claiming illness stems from imbalanced humors, blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile. Their prized cure: bloodletting. A barber surgeon arrives with filthy flame blades to drain pints of your blood, convinced this will restore balance. No one notices patients weaken further after treatment. When you cough blood next morning, they prescribe leeches for your lungs. Actual diseases swarm through villages like invisible predators. Dysentery strikes yearly gut-wrenching cramps, bloody diarrhea that dehydrates children to husks within days. Smallpox leaves survivors scarred and blind. Ergot poisoning from moldy rye grains causes convulsions villagers call St. Anthony's fire. But the Black Death reigns supreme: buboes, swelling in groins and armpits, black skin blotches, bodies rotting before the heart stops. When it comes, villages lose half their people in weeks. Priests refuse last rites for fear of infection. Corpses pile up faster than graves can be dug. Treatment resembles torture more than healing. A toothache means the barber grabs iron forceps to wrench the molar out, no anesthesia beyond a leather strap to bite. Broken bones get splinted incorrectly, leaving peasants hobbling forever. Herbal poultices might contain anything from moldy bread to crushed earthworms. Midwives stuff bleeding wounds with spider webs or dung. Church relics get pressed against sick splinters of the true cross that are just random wood chips infused with superstition. Childbirth is Russian roulette. 1 in 3 women dies during or after delivery. Midwives have no concept of germs. They wipe newborn faces with unwashed rags, pack birth canals with dirty moss to stop bleeding. Puerperal fever kills so routinely that grooms request a second wife clause in marriage contracts. Infants fare worse. Maybe 4 of 7 live past 5 years. Those who survive bear scars, rickets from malnutrition, smallpox pits, twisted spines from poorly set fractures. The healthiest-seeming adult might collapse tomorrow. A scratch from rusty plowshare triggers lockjaw jaw muscles seize until you suffocate with a grotesque grin. Falling sickness epilepsy means demon possession victims get tied to church altars for exorcisms that escalate to beatings. Even minor burns often lead to gangrene as flies lay eggs in weeping wounds. Those who complain of elf stroke, likely strokes, or heart attacks get prescribed potions containing literal crushed human skulls. Urban centers double as death traps. Streets churn with feces-contaminated mud. Butchers dump offal outside shops where rats swarm. Hall butchers slaughter livestock indoors. Blood runs through floor cracks into basement dwellings below. Wealth offers no protection. Kings' sons die from infected paper cuts. Queens perish in childbirth, same as pig farmers' wives. Doctors wear beaked masks stuffed with herbs during plagues, unaware the real killer lurks in fleas jumping from their patients' robes. Every household keeps a wooden death measure, a stick size to dig that person's grave efficiently. When fever takes someone, the stick gets tossed to grave diggers who excavate without even seeing the corpse. Coffins get reused bodies dumped into pits wrapped only in shrouds. Not that you'd want your rotting kin in the house long anyway. The stench of decomposition starts within hours in summer heat. Germ theory won't exist for centuries. No one connects filthy hands to disease or understands why plague strikes harder near rat-infested granaries. Miasmabad air gets blamed instead. Recommendations range from useless to deadly. Holding flowers to block foul smells better than nothing, drinking powdered emeralds toxic, or the ever-popular bloodletting fatal for severe cases. Chronic conditions grind you down year after year. Malnutrition causes scurvy, gums bleeding, teeth loosening until you can't chew tough bread. Bowel parasites from contaminated food cause perpetual diarrhea. Lung diseases from cooking fires leave you gasping like a landed fish. Arthritis curls fingers into claws decades before old age. Old is relative anyway. If you reach 40, you've outlived most peers. Herbal remedies sometimes help by accident. Willow bark tea dulls pain. It contains salicylic acid, precursor to aspirin. Honey smeared on wounds occasionally prevents infection. But for every effective treatment, 10 are actively harmful. Mercury potions for syphilis that induce madness. Lead-based cosmetics eaten by noble women to improve pallor. Urine enemas for digestive complaints. The Church proclaims illness as God's judgment. When cures fail, which they usually do, priests declare the patient sinful. Kings touch scrofulous sufferers to cure the king's evil through divine right spoiler. It never works. Pilgrims trudge miles to shrines where martyrs' bones supposedly heal, infecting each other at crowded hostels along the way. Some miraculous recoveries occur because the sick outlive diseases naturally evidence cited to prove divine intervention worked. Death is ever present in ways modern minds can't grasp. Corpses get carried past your home weekly. Gravediggers work continuously. Hired death watchers sit with contagious patients so families won't catch illness. Most watchers die within seasons. Grim humor flourishes. Jokes about the dance of death decorate church walls, reminding everyone their turn comes soon. Your fever worsens? Neighbors avoid your hut now, not just from contagion fear, but because spiritual pollution clings to sickness. The priest arrives wearing incense swinging censers to drive off demons. His holy water is just as contaminated as the village well. As delirium sets in, you hear the carpenter outside measuring wood for your coffin. Not pessimism, just practicality. If you survive, the boards get reused. If not, they save time. Anyone suggesting doctors wash hands between patients would be laughed at, then burned as a witch for strange ideas. Medical progress won't come for centuries. For now, you suffer through bleeding, poultices, and prayers while diseases prune humanity unchecked. Medicine was as dangerous as the disease when it wasn't actively hastening death. And should you miraculously recover, congratulations! Tomorrow you'll bend aching joints back into fields under watchful eyes of lords enforcing impossible quotas. Because in this world, the cure for poverty remains unchanged: more labor until your body finally gives out for good. But before facing another dawn, there's the small matter of navigating social hierarchies designed to keep peasants exactly where they are. You were born into your place on this ladder, and you'll die on the same rung. Feudal society isn't just divided, it's carved in stone. At the top, the king grants land to lords who swear military service. Those lords parcel out estates to knights who police peasants like you. And at the bottom, your entire existence serves those above. There's no resume to improve your station, no merit-based promotions, just generations of servitude baked into the system. The lord of your manor owns everything. The fields you till, the huts you sleep in, even the roadside ditches where you dump waste. In return for protection, you surrender 1/3 of your crops before eating a single grain. Another 1/10 goes to the church, fail to pay tithes, and priests threaten eternal damnation. What's left barely feeds your family, but complaining means eviction. Or worse. Last harvest, a cottager questioned the steward's grain measurements. They found his body in a furrow 3 days later, throat slit like a stuck pig. Legal rights don't exist for your class. The Lord's court handles all disputes with him as judge. Need to marry? Pay a fee? Want to grind grain at home instead of the Lord's mill? That's a fine. Your daughter catches a night's eye. Pray he claims due senior politely instead of dragging her to the stables. The law exists to extract labor and fees, not deliver justice. Even minor infractions like forgetting to salute the steward might cost a week's bread ration. Violating feudal contracts brings brutal consequences. Poaching a deer from the Lord's forest could mean losing a hand. Skipping work on domain lands you in the stock's public humiliation while neighbors throw rotting food. Repeat offenders get branded or hanged. Rebellions end predictably. After the 1381 peasants' revolt, leaders were disemboweled alive before cheering nobles. Their severed heads decorated London Bridge for years as deterrents. The church reinforces this hierarchy with cosmic threats. Priests preach that suffering on earth earns heavenly rewards while questioning authority guarantees hellfire. Illiteracy helps the narrative you can't read scripture yourself to spot contradictions. When drought kills crops, preachers blame village sins rather than weather. Tithing collectors arrive like clockwork, their pouches fattened by families who can't spare a single groat. Education stays deliberately out of reach. Lords forbid peasant schooling. Reading might give you dangerous ideas. Your children learn only what's necessary for field work. The rare clever kid who picks up Latin from listening to Mass gets watched suspiciously. Knowledge is power, and power must remain concentrated. Even if you somehow learned letters, books cost more than a year's harvest. The few literate peasants become parish clerks, but they're kept busy copying tax rolls, not spreading enlightenment. Marriage offers no escape, just different shackles. Girls wed as young as 12, often too much older men chosen for economic ties between families. Your wife works dawn till dusk beside you cooking, spinning, weeding, then births babies annually despite exhaustion. Stillbirths and infant deaths numb her with grief, but there's no time to mourn properly before next planting season. Wandering preachers call this God's natural order, as if starvation and childbed deaths were divine preferences. Even death doesn't free you from obligations. Your eldest son inherits the right to work your strip of land provided he continues paying your outstanding fees. Younger siblings become beggars or day laborers. Widows might keep the hut if they remarry quickly, otherwise the Lord reclaims it. Your corpse gets buried in unconsecrated ground unless the priest receives his burial fee up front. 3 generations of your ancestors lie in paupers' trenches because coin always ran short before souls did. Festivals pretend to append the hierarchy temporarily. At Christmas, a lord of misrule gets crowned to mock nobility's excesses, but come January, the real lords resume flogging slackers. During harvest home celebrations, servants eat at the manor's high table for one night. Then it's back to scraping mold off stored grains while the steward's hounds feast on fresh meat daily. These brief respites only emphasize the immutability of daily oppression. Physical markers enforce the divide constantly. The manor house stands on a hill literally above peasants. Its stone walls mock your Waddleland daub hut. When the Lord rides past in embroidered silks, you kneel in roadside mud. His children learn horsemanship, yours learn which wild roots want poison them. At church, nobility occupies front pews while you stand in back if you're allowed inside at all rather than listening through open windows. Attempting escape rarely works. Run to a town. You're not a freeman entitled to work there. Most guilds exclude peasants. Forests shelter outlaws, but starvation or wolf's bane make those choices equally grim. The rare runaway who succeeds becomes someone else's serf under a new name. Borders aren't lines on maps, but chains of obligation stretching from king to lowest laborer. Breaking one link just transfers your suffering elsewhere. You secretly envy millers and blacksmiths. They're bound to the land like you, but sell skills for extra coin. Maybe if you'd been born smarter, stronger, luckier. But those thoughts are dangerous. The system depends on accepting destiny. Smart peasants get accused of witchcraft. Strong ones get conscripted for foreign wars. Luck turns when lords raise fees to fund their tournaments. Better to keep your head down, your back bent, your mouth shut. Faith provides the only solace, however thin. You whisper prayers while threshing grain, imagining angels weighing good deeds against the sin of resenting your betters. Maybe God notices your suffering. Maybe heaven's feast tables groan with bounty unlike the watery gruel in your bowl. Or maybe the priests lie like the tax collectors do. You'll never know for certain unless damnation proves real. An unsettling thought when confessing such doubts risks being branded a heretic. The birth lottery couldn't have placed you lower. Noble babies get silver spoons. You got a handful of straw to gnaw while your mother returned to field work. Now your own children inherit the same endless cycle. Their futures were decided before their first breaths plow, so reap, pay, obey, die. No amount of toil changes that. Skill won't elevate you. Intelligence won't save you. Compliance barely sustains you. Freedom was a concept for others, those with money enough to buy it or swords enough to take it. For you, survival means submitting to the ladder's weight every day until it finally crushes you into the earth you've spent a lifetime cultivating. And as you drag another basket of stones from the Lord's new vineyard, you notice the steward eyeing your teenage son's strong back with approval. Tomorrow's drudge will replace you when your spine gives out. The system continues unbroken. But before you can contemplate rebellion's futility further, a commotion erupts near the manor gates. Shouts, the clang of metal, a scream cut abruptly short. Village gossip warned of bandits growing desperate as winter approaches. Seems today's lesson won't be about feudal oppression, but medieval justice's sharp edge. The knock at your door after curfew could be a neighbor seeking help or a drunken soldier demanding entry. In medieval life, violence isn't an exception, it's the backdrop against which everything unfolds. Your wife tightens her grip on the fire poker whenever voices rise at the tavern. Your children know to hide under the bed when sword-clanking strangers pass through town. There are no emergency numbers to call, no police patrols keeping watch, just the uneasy awareness that harm could come from any direction at any moment. Domestic disputes rarely stay verbal. A husband's right to chastise his wife with sticks remains legally protected across Europe. Neighbors hear crashes and screams, but don't intervene. What happens behind closed doors is a family matter. Children learn early that a backhanded slap might follow spilled milk or delayed obedience. Village gossips whisper about the cooper's daughter married off at 14 to a man twice her age who accidentally pushed her down the stairs last winter. She walks with a limp now. No one asks questions. Public spaces offer no reprieve. Tavern brawls erupt over dice games gone sour. Farmers settle land disputes with fists or scythes before the steward can levy fines. Traveling merchants hire crossbow-toting guards not for show, but because highwaymen lurk behind every second thicket. On market days, cut purses work the crowds while drunk laborers trade broken teeth like currency. You've seen men gutted over arguments about pig feed quality. The concept of escalation doesn't exist here. Pride demands retaliation. Justice prefers spectacle over fairness. For minor theft, your hands get pinned to the stocks while villagers pelt you with stones and offal. More serious crimes warrant branding irons heated in the square's brazier, a permanent T for thief seared into your cheek. Actual trials are rare. Most cases rely on God's judgment through ordeals. Maybe you'll carry a red-hot iron 9 paces. If your wounds heal cleanly within 3 days, you're innocent. Or perhaps they'll toss you bound into a pond, float, and you're guilty and hanged, sink and you're innocent but drowned. Either way, the system favors those wealthy enough to bribe their way to milder punishments. Execution days draw cheering crowds. Hangings happen routinely, but creative punishments spice up special occasions. A counterfeiter might be boiled alive in oil. A regicide gets drawn and quartered. Horses rip his limbs off while he still breathes. Traitors hang just long enough to lose consciousness before being disemboweled before their own eyes. Children bring lunches to watch like it's festival entertainment. The key lesson isn't about morality, it's about demonstrating what happens when peasants forget their place. War touches everyone eventually. When lords muster armies, they conscript your strongest sons with no training, just a pike shoved into calloused hands before marching toward professional killers. Returning veterans bring nightmares and missing limbs. Most don't return at all. Marauding mercenaries burn fields for fun during conflicts. Defenseless villages become buffet tables for hungry soldiers, food stores plundered, women assaulted, children trampled under war horses. Even in peacetime, the threat lingers like the stench of an old battlefield. Property crimes often carry stricter penalties than murder. Poaching a deer from the Lord's forest means losing a hand if you're lucky, hanging if you're not. Meanwhile, a nobleman who slaughters a peasant might pay a modest fine called wergeld, literally pricing a commoner's life in livestock equivalents. Wealthy offenders buy their way out of consequences, while you'd hang for stealing a loaf to feed starving children. The law protects the propertied, not the people. Private vengeance flourishes where courts fail. Blood feuds last generations. Your grandfather's quarrel with the blacksmith's family still means avoiding their sons after dark. Without forensic evidence or detectives, midnight ambushes go unpunished unless witnessed by someone powerful enough to care. You keep a hatchet under your straw mattress not for animals, but for the day your neighbor's simmering grudge boils over. Sleep comes lightly when every shadow could hold a knife. Banditry provides the outlaw alternative to starvation. Deserted soldiers and desperate peasants form highway gangs prowling trade routes. Some become folk heroes stealing from tax collectors to share with the poor, but most take whatever they want from whomever they catch. Villages organize watch rotations, but ill-equipped farmers stand little chance against armored thieves. When travelers go missing near Miller's Cross, everyone pretends not to notice fresh mounds in the woods. Asking questions invites similar disappearance. The church preaches pacifism while practicing violence. Monks swing quarterstaffs to guard tithe coffers. Inquisitors torture confessions from heretics with thumbscrews, and Judas chairs devices designed to stretch spines slowly apart. Crusade recruiters promise heavenly rewards for slaughtering infidels abroad. Meanwhile, your local priest keeps a lead-tipped processional cross for unruly parishioners. Spiritual guidance comes with bruises here. Women navigate special dangers. A widow's inherited property makes her a target for forced marriages. Unaccompanied travelers risk assault by mercenaries, pilgrims, even clergy. Girls fetching water from streams learn to go in groups after the fuller's apprentice dragged one into the reeds last autumn. She bore the child in silence. He faced no consequences beyond a shrug from the bailiff. Domestic violence blends into daily life so thoroughly that women measure suitors by only hits when drunk, being preferable to beats sober. Safety measures barely exist. Barring your flimsy door won't stop armed intruders. Village constables are just farmers handed a badge, untrained, unarmed, and unlikely to confront real danger. Nighttime brings terrifying vulnerability. Criminals know homes contain nothing more lethal than rusted kitchen knives. You sleep with livestock inside not just for warmth, but because their noise might warn of intruders. The psychological toll wears as deep as physical scars. Jumping at slamming shutters, scanning crowds for drawn blades, teaching children to hide rather than fight back. Constant low-grade vigilance drains energy needed for survival. Some crack under the strain. The miller's wife wanders the roads at night muttering about shadows that aren't there. Others lean into brutality themselves, becoming the threat they once feared. Most just numb themselves to it all, accepting violence like bad weather, inescapable, unpredictable, and routinely fatal. Safety was an illusion, a temporary lapse between disasters. And for women, whose bodies and labor belonged first to fathers then husbands, survival required navigating even more invisible knives in the dark. But that's another layer of medieval misery altogether. Your first bleed comes at 12, and the matchmaking starts before the cloth finishes drying. As a medieval woman, you have three choices: become a wife, a mother, or a nun. That's it. No trades await you unless widowed. No schooling unless noble. Your value lies between your legs and in your ability to grind grain without complaint. The priest calls this divine order. You'll call it survival. Marriage negotiations happen over your head. Your father accepts 2 goats and a bolt of linen for your hand at 14. The groom is 30. Missing teeth, smells of sour ale, irrelevant details. His field needs tending, his house needs cleaning, his bed needs filling. The contract gets sealed before you've met him properly. Your wedding night involves wine to dull your senses and a blood-stained sheet displayed to neighbors as proof of transaction completion. Resistance means beatings. Escape means starvation. Childbirth arrives yearly like harvest season, just as predictable, twice as deadly. Midwives arrive with dirty hands and superstitions. They tie leather straps to the bed frame for you to pull while screaming. No pain relief beyond a wooden stick to bite. When labor stalls, they brew penny royalty that might kill the baby to save you or kill you trying. 1 in 5 pregnancies ends with the mother's death. You survive 3 deliveries before the 4th leaves you feverish for weeks. The local wise woman packs your womb with moldy bread to stop the bleeding. It works. Mostly. Motherhood means constant vigilance against invisible threats. Colicky babies get dosed with opium-laced quietness syrups that sometimes quiet them permanently. Teething. Rub rabbit brains on their gums. Coughing fits require drinking piss mixed with thyme. You bury 2 children before they walk, 1 to summer flux, 1 to the midwife's dirty blade cutting an umbilical infection. The priest says unbaptized infants languish in limbo. You weep into the third one's cradle each night, memorizing the rise and fall of its chest. Your legal status equals livestock. Can't inherit unless no male relatives exist. Can't testify against a rapist unless he confesses voluntarily. Your husband legally owns everything you produce: children, woven cloth, even the cheese you painstakingly age in the cellar. The village court laughs when you complain about his mistress moving into your home. The law allowed him to correct you with rods no thicker than his thumb. He uses an oak switch and claims it's willow. Neighbors pretend not to hear the screams. Widowhood offers brief freedom before new shackles clamp down. Without a man, you suddenly own his lands, making you prey. The Lord pressures you to remarry his cousin. Traveling soldiers offer protection for sexual favors. Former in-laws sue for the children, claiming you'll starve them. You spend the inheritance bribing officials to leave you alone. By spring, you've wed the blacksmith not by choice, but because his forge provides enough coin to pay off the vultures. The marriage bed feels no different than the last. Education remains deliberately out of reach. Reading invites accusations of witchcraft. Arithmetic suggests you're skimming market profits. Even spinning wool too efficiently draws suspicion. How'd you learn that stitch unless consorting with demons? Noble girls might tutor as ladies in waiting. You learn through bloody experience. When your daughter asks why the moon changes shape, you hush her sharply. Curiosity killed the last woman who spoke of such things, burned as a heretic in the next town over. The church controls your body like farmland. Priests bend sinful positions in marriage beds while ignoring husbands who take lovers. Confession requires detailing intimate acts to men who later preach your inherent impurity. Monthly cycles make you unclean, no entering sacred spaces until you've been purified. Yet, when harvests fail, the same clerics blame women's loose morals for invoking God's wrath. A drought must be that widow who bathes too often. Still births. Obviously some girls' lustful thoughts. Textile work fills endless hours after field labor. Carding wool leaves bloody cracks and fingertips. Spinning flax takes for hours per skein. You need 30 just for a basic tunic. Weaving causes permanent back hunches from leaning over looms. Your greatest skill becomes embroidering church vestments you'll never touch with clean hands. Nights find you mending by dim tallow light, squinting through smoke that stains the ceiling black along with your lungs. Medical knowledge dies with village crones. When Agnes the herbwife passes, centuries of birthing wisdom vanish. Which plants ease labor, which stop hemorrhages. The young priest declares her potions witchcraft and burns her recipe book. Next birthing season, 3 mothers perish from remedies now lost. You secretly salvage a scrap of her notes on fever relief, hiding it beneath a floorboard. If found, it's kindling for your pyre. Festivals briefly lift the weight until they don't. May Day lets you dance with other women, weaving ribbons around a pole as men leer. Harvest Home promises a feast, but you spend it serving lords' tables instead of eating. At Christmas, you play abbess and mock ceremonies where men dress as nuns. Everyone laughs when they lift skirts to show hairy legs. The parody stings because real convents remain your only escape route if your family paid the entry dowry. They didn't. Old age brings no respite. Without teeth, you gum hard bread into paste. Arthritic fingers struggle to card wool anymore. Widowed again, you move into your son's home as a servant, minding grandchildren, stirring pots, stepping lightly around his wife's temper. One winter chill settles in your chest. They give your bed to a healthy worker 2 days after your last rattling breath. Your grave gets no marker, just another mound in the pauper's field. A woman's life was a tightrope walk, one misstep from ruin, one accusation from flames. And just when you finally adapt to the rhythm, the seasons shift again. Winter's frost bite harsher than any lord's whip, proving nature cares even less for your suffering than men do. But that's another layer of torment altogether. The first frost isn't pretty, it's deadly. You wake to ice crystals forming on the inside walls of your hut. Your breath hangs visible in the air. That drafty Waterland daub construction that barely blocked summer rain now offers no defense against winter's teeth. No insulation exists here, just gaps between wooden slats stuffed with mud and straw that shrinks as it dries. Your fingers go numb lacing up your tunic. Frost already dusts the straw where your children sleep huddled together like piglets. Firewood becomes more precious than bread. Forests belong to the Lord, and his gamekeepers patrol for peasants stealing deadfall. What little wood you gathered in autumn must last until spring. Nights mean choosing between warmth and light burn logs for heat or save them to cook tomorrow's thin gruel. You ration sticks like coins, feeding the hearth just enough to keep infants from turning blue. The hearth smoke has nowhere to go but your lungs, the hole in the roof that serves as a chimney coughs more fumes back inside than it expels. Frostbite claims body parts casually. Your neighbor loses 3 toes after falling asleep too close to the embers. His frozen feet didn't feel the burns until morning. Children's cheeks blister from wind exposure during necessary trips to the frozen latrine ditch. Elders develop winter cough that never fully leaves their chests. Fingers turn black at the tips. You've seen shepherds snap off dead fingertips like dry twigs when gangrene sets in. The barber surgeon keeps his amputation saw busy December through March. Bed becomes a survival strategy. The whole family sleeps piled together like livestock, sharing foul-smelling body heat under threadbare wool blankets. Infants nestle against grandparents whose fading warmth might be the only thing keeping them alive. You sleep in your day clothes, the same sweat-stiffened tunic and hose that have molded to your shape since autumn. Removing them risks losing precious warmth. Fleas thrive in these conditions, but scratching frozen skin draws blood easier than in summer. Food scarcity turns desperate. What little grain you stored now grows mold in damp corners. The autumn pork fat rendered for cooking froze and thawed to many times, acquiring a rancid edge. Root vegetables from the harvest grow spongy with rot. You boil everything into thin gruel, pretending the floating mold patches add flavor. Children's ribs show through their skin by candle mass. Last winter, old Tom ate his leather shoes. Before the thaw came, he still limps from the belly cramps it caused. Disease spreads faster in close quarters. Coughs echo through the village as families crowd together in huts barely large enough for summer living. Winter fever kills more reliably than any plague what modern doctors call pneumonia. Without fresh plants, herbal remedies dwindle to dried husks of questionable potency. The wise woman prescribes inhaling steam from boiled urine for chest ailments. It does nothing but make your eyes water. When little Marta dies in the night, her body stays in the hut for 3 days because the frozen ground won't accept graves. Travel ceases entirely. Snow drifts block paths to neighboring villages. The mill stream freezes solid, halting what little grinding you could barter for. No traders bring news or salt. Isolated and starving, some villages resort to things nobody discusses come springtime. Last year, a woodsman found an abandoned hamlet where the last survivor had apparently eaten the others. Your priest calls it demonic work, but hunger makes theologians of no one. Livestock suffer alongside humans. Chickens stop laying eggs. The scrawny cow gives less milk each day until her udders run dry. You bring the family pig inside to preserve its warmth and to prevent neighbors from stealing it. The stench of pig shit mixes with human waste in the cramped hut. When the animal finally starves in February, its meager meat gets rationed for weeks despite the greasy, half-rotten taste. Cold reshapes your body. Fingers stay permanently curled like claws even in warmer months. Lips crack and bleed until smiling becomes painful. Ears develop thick scar tissue from repeated frostbite. The village carpenter no longer feels his toes, they're just numb lumps at the end of his feet that turn black each winter and heal white by summer. Children stop growing between November and April, their bodies conserving every scrap of energy just to maintain core temperature. The wealthy endure differently. From your frozen fields, you can see smoke pouring from the manor's dozen chimneys. Their stone walls hold heat better than your hovel. Their servants haul wagon loads of seasoned firewood from enclosed forests. While you ration moldy oats, the Lord hosts winter feasts where boar and swan roast endlessly on spits. His children wear fur-lined cloaks, yours huddle under sacks stuffed with leaves for insulation. Inequality feels sharper when your teeth won't stop chattering. Christmas offers brief respite, if you can call it that. The 12 days of celebration mean slightly larger rations from the manor. You get a single portion of salted pork to flavor weeks of gruel. The church distributes stale bread blessed as poor man's feast. It still cracks teeth, but comes with spiritual bonus points. Carolers brave the cold to sing for scraps at wealthier homes. Your youngest joins them, returning with chilled lungs and half a sausage he stole from a windowsill. You eat it guiltily without waking his siblings. By late winter, madness creeps in. The endless dark and hunger play tricks on minds. Margit claims she sees her dead son walking the pastures at night. Young Jacob tries to eat frozen mud. You catch yourself staring at the family dog for too long, calculating. The village idiot, already thin in summer, wanders naked through a snowstorm, babbling about angels. They find him frozen solid by the well, his skin strangely serene in death. Thaw brings its own dangers. Melting snow floods the hut's dirt floor, turning it to a muddy bog that swallows sandals whole. Frost-heaved ground ruins early plantings. Starved bodies succumb to spring illnesses that should have been trivial. Last March, 3 elders died within days of warmer weather. Their hearts gave out after months of strain. The church calls it God's will. You notice the Lord's aged parents survive winter comfortably every year. Winter was a season of suffering, not picturesque snowscapes, but an endless siege against the elements where every decision meant choosing which part of yourself to sacrifice next. And just when you've survived the cold, summer arrives like a hammer blow to sunburned necks and raw shoulders. But that's another kind of misery altogether. The summer sun doesn't just warm your skin, it bakes you alive in your own home. That damp, earthy smell from winter. Now it's a thick stew of sweat, animal dung, and rotting food. Your one-room hut turns into an oven by mid-morning, the thatched roof trapping heat like wool blankets over your head. No cross breezes reach through the small windows, just sticky air thick with flies buzzing around the chamber pot in the corner. You wake soaked in sweat before dawn, straw from the mattress sticking to your damp skin. Fleas bite more aggressively in summer, their tiny bodies thriving in the heat. The wool tunic you slept in clings to your back, stiff with yesterday's labor and last night's sweat. Changing clothes isn't an option, you own to tunics total, and the other ones being aired out by hanging near the pig pen where it absorbs new stenches. Breakfast sours faster than you can eat it. The thin beer turns vinegary by noon. Bread grows fuzzy green patches if left uncovered for a day. Meat becomes maggot food within hours unless heavily salted, a luxury you can't afford. Flies swarm every uncovered dish, laying eggs in your grain stores while you're out working. You learn to chew carefully, picking weevils out of your porridge like extra protein. Water becomes both necessity and threat. The village well runs lower each summer, its tepid water increasingly cloudy. Kids haul buckets back sweating, their arms trembling under the weight. Dysentery spreads as waste from makeshift privies seeps into groundwater. Dehydration kills, slower headaches blurring vision until you collapse mid-furrow. The Lord Steward allows one short water break per morning, timed by the shadow on his sundial. Fields demand more than winter ever did. Wheat won't harvest itself. You swing a sickle under the blinding sun, blades of chaff flying into your eyes and mouth. Hands blister through rough gloves, then callous over, then blister again. Children tasked with gleaning stray grains faint from heat stroke. The steward keeps tally, fall behind quota, and your winter rations get cut. Heat transforms clothing into torture devices. Will tunics itch like 1,000 ants crawling on raw skin? Leather shoes soften in the heat, gripping your feet like second skins slick with sweat. Workers strip to the waist when the steward isn't looking, risking sunburn that peels in painful sheets later. Women endure layers of linen shifts and kirtles, no relief allowed for modesty's sake. Storms bring temporary relief and lasting damage. Summer rains cool the air for an hour before turning fields into mud pits. Hailstorms destroy entire crops in minutes. You once saw a vineyard stripped bare by ice chunks the size of chicken eggs. Lightning strikes huts regularly, their thatch roofs perfect kindling. After last month's storm, 3 families lost their homes and winter grain stores in one fiery night. Insects become unrelenting enemies. Flies cluster around eyes and mouths, drawn to moisture. Mosquitoes rise from nearby marshes at dusk, bringing ague that leaves workers shaking violently to grip tools. Beetles infest grain stores, their larvae wiggling conspicuously in every bowl of porridge. You develop a permanent twitch from swarming gnats during planting. Food preservation becomes a desperate game. Cheese spoils unless soaked in brine that makes it nearly inedible. Butter turns rancid without cool cellars to store it. Women rise before dawn to bake just enough bread for the day anything more risks mold or rats. The smell of slightly rotten meat gets masked with handfuls of pungent herbs if you're lucky enough to have any. Harvest festivals tease with false abundance. The Lord allows one celebratory meal after the last wagon load of wheat gets hauled to his granary. You taste proper roast meat for the first time in months to thin slices cut smaller than your palm. Children lick grease off fingers while the steward warns against pilfering. That night, 3 families get caught stealing grain sacks. Their punishment plays out in the stocks under the August sun. The pressure to store winter food haunts every decision. A single missed day of weeding could mean 10 fewer turnips come January. You barter your best linen for extra salt to preserve what little pork fat you have. Older children get pulled from field work to gather nuts and berries, their small hands better suited for stripping bushes clean. Every calculation teeters between survival and starvation. Animals suffer alongside humans. Flies cluster around cows' eyes, spreading infections. Chickens stop laying in extreme heat. Dogs grow listless, tongues lolling as they pant in whatever shade they can find. Pigs wallow in their own filth just to cool down. When old Thomas prized milk cow drops dead from the heat, the village picks its bones clean within hours. Night brings no true relief. The hut retains daytime heat like a bread oven cooling slowly. You lie atop the scratchy straw mattress, naked except for a linen shift, sweat pooling in the hollow of your throat. Fleas feast freely in the dark. Babies wail from heat rash while adults swat blindly at mosquitoes buzzing near ears. Sleep comes in brief, restless snatches between church bells marking the hours. The wealthy fare differently, naturally. The manor house's thick stone walls stay relatively cool. Servants fan noble ladies as they sip chilled wine from the cellar. The Lord complains about oppressive weather while peasants collapse in his fields. His children swim in a designated pond guarded from commoners. You glimpse them through the trees' once blumblims splashing in clear water while your own kids drink from the same mud puddle the pigs use. Waterborne illnesses spike after rainstorms. The village well floods with runoff from the midden heap. Within days, half the workers clutch their stomachs between trips to the ditch. The wise woman dispenses tansy tea that tastes like bitterness itself. It helps some, kills others. No one connects the deaths to drinking water. They blame bad humors or God's displeasure instead. Summer was no vacation, just a different flavor of suffering. And as the heat finally breaks in late August, your bones already dread the familiar tightening of winter's approach. The relentless cycle continues, each season carving deeper grooves of exhaustion into your body. But before you can brace for autumn's chill, there's the small matter of enduring your own mind's slow unraveling. The weight of medieval life presses down harder than any plow. You wake to the same endless cycle, back bent over fields, hands torn from labor, stomach never full. The grind doesn't just break bodies, it fractures minds slowly, like ice cracking underfoot. Hope doesn't exist here. Not really. Tomorrow will be the same as today. Dawn to dusk labor, hunger gnawing at your ribs, fleeting sleep on a flea-infested palate. Peasant rebellions occasionally flare up, a few weeks of chaos before lords crush them brutally. You stopped believing change was possible after witnessing 3 hanged neighbors swaying from oak branches last summer. Their crime: demanding less arbitrary beatings from the manor steward. Now you keep your head down, eyes fixed on the dirt. Religion offers mixed comfort. The priest drones endlessly about heavenly rewards for earthly suffering, but his belly jiggles as he lectures starving parishioners. You confess petty sins, weakly stealing an apple, envying the blacksmith's shoes while ignoring the blasphemous thoughts whispering that God must hate peasants. Fear sticks deeper than faith, the threat of hell keeps you meek when rage bubbles up. But sometimes, kneeling in church, you fantasize about punching the gilded crucifix until your knuckles split. Small pleasures become lifelines. Ale at harvest time weak and sour, but enough to blur the edges for an evening. The rare festival day when you dance until your feet bleed, spinning to music piped by a toothless farmer. Storytelling by firelight, where travelers share tales of places no one here will ever see. These moments stitch together the tattered edges of your sanity. Children adapt in disturbing ways. Your daughter plays funeral with her siblings, burying straw dolls with solemn mimicry of the priest. The boys hold mock trials where they sentence rats to hanging. Laughter comes rarely and never without a bitter edge. You catch your youngest chewing on a leather strap one evening, not hungry, just dulling the monotony with jaw movement. Their games reflect the only world they've ever known. Sleep brings no escape. Dreams replay daylight misery's endless fields to till, stewards cracking whips, infants starving in your arms. You wake more exhausted than when you lay down, stretching sweat-damp skin. Some nights, hallucinations creep in from hunger, shadowy figures beckoning from hut corners, voices murmuring from the thatch roof. The line between waking and dreaming blurs dangerously. Extended families fracture under strain. Brothers feud over inheritance scraps. Sisters accuse each other of stealing bread crusts. That time your uncle went mad and wandered into the winter woods, was it truly madness or just rational escape? You guard your thoughts carefully now, knowing how easily melancholy gets labeled as demonic possession. The village gossips already whisper about widow Agnes talking to her dead husband. Work occupies every waking thought, calculating grain stores while weeding, planting firewood roots during harvest, mending tools in daylight scraps. There's no mental space left for anything else, no philosophy, no art, no idle curiosity. The miller's son once asked why the moon changes shape. The priest boxed his ears for frivolous questioning. Now the boy stares blankly at everything, his questions turned inward to rot. Resilience calcifies into numbness. You stop noticing the stench of unwashed bodies after 20 years immersed in it. The screams of a neighbor being disciplined blend into background noise. Children's graves become routine dig, bury, return to fields before the steward marks you absent. Your capacity for grief shrinks alongside your stomach. Some call this strength. It feels more like dying slowly while still breathing. Sanity relies on small rebellions. Singing lewd songs about the Lord when no overseers lurk nearby. Sneaking an extra handful of grain at milling time, letting the oxen rest an extra minute while pretending to adjust their harness. These tiny acts of defiance maintain some illusion of control. When the steward isn't looking, you spit into his footprints. Cognitive abilities suffer unseen. Chronic malnutrition starves the brain as surely as the belly. Memories fray, you forget your mother's face despite burying her just last autumn. Simple calculations baffle you now. Last market day, you accepted half price for eggs and didn't realize until too late. The children learn slower too, their eyes dull during rare scripture lessons. Generations of this life have bred peasants who can endure endlessly but think little. Old age accelerates the decline. Grandfather stares at the fire for hours, whispering arguments with long-dead relatives. His hands shake not from palsy, but from decades of gripping freezing tools. The stories he tells make no sense, any more jumbled events from different years spliced together. When he dies midwinter, no one mourns loudly. His mind had been slipping away for seasons already. The church labels it acedia, a sin of listless despair. Priests prescribe more prayer, more self-flagellation. You know the truth. It's not spiritual failing, but inevitability. No human mind can weather ceaseless toil without eroding. Some turn to drink, others to violence, most to quiet dissociation. The village idiot wasn't born that way. 30 years of hunger and labor made him so. Survival was a full-time job with overtime demanded by the seasons. And as dusk paints the fields gold, signaling another day endured, your body moves toward home while your mind lingers somewhere far away, a place with full bellies and soft beds that might as well be mythical. Tomorrow's pre-dawn bell will drag you back to reality soon enough. The hut looms ahead, barely visible in twilight. Inside, your family murmurs over supper scraps another night, pretending the gruel stretches far enough. You pause at the door, watching the last light fade behind the manor house where torches already flicker in merry windows. For a heartbeat, something dangerous flickers in your chest. Then it's gone, buried deep where inconvenient emotions go to die. Practical concerns remain: eat, sleep, survive until sunrise. The mental exhaustion can wait. The church bell tolls a sound that means rest, but not relief. You straighten your back for the first time in 14 hours, vertebrae popping like green wood in a fire. Every muscle screams. Your hands want fully unclench after gripping the hoe all day. Fingers remain half curled like dead roots. The walk home is a shuffle, feet dragging through mud that sucks at your shoes with each step. Children straggle behind you, too tired to complain about hunger for once. Their silence is worse than whining. Home offers no comfort. The hut's interior is dim even in summer evenings, no windows, just cracks between planks filtering the last gray light. That familiar stench hits you, damp straw and washed bodies, the acidic tang of the chamber pot in the corner. It's cooler than the fields, but somehow heavier, the air thick, people with wood smoke trapped under the thatch. The hearth fire died hours ago, no one was here to feed it. Supper is the same as breakfast, a bowl of cold pottage with flecks of turnip floating in it. The bread's harder today, you dunk it in weak beer until it softens enough to chew. Your wife nurses the baby while eating. The child screams when her milk runs dry. No one talks much. Words require energy you don't have. A single tallow candle gutters on the table, its faint light making shadows jump like restless spirits. At a farrier's wages, candles cost half a day's labor each. You'll blow this one out soon and eat in darkness. The straw mattress hasn't improved since morning. Lumpy, damp, and alive with fleas that scatter when you kneel on it. Will blankets scratch your sunburned skin as you lie down fully clothed? No point in racing. Tomorrow's dawn comes brutally early, and you'll want every second of sleep possible. Besides, the night chill will seep in sooner or later. Your tunic provides an extra layer against it. Darkness settles like a weight. Without candles, the hut becomes a void punctuated by breathing and the occasional rustle of straw. Someone, maybe your youngest, starts coughing in the corner. It's the wet, rattling kind that lingers for weeks. You make a mental note to ask the herb wife about it tomorrow. Then remember you promised her to eggs last time and never paid. The cough continues, syncopated with the snores from your spouse. Your body should sleep, but your mind won't shut down. The steward's voice echoes harvest quotas increasing next week. The miller's daughter died in childbirth yesterday. Old Tom's cough turned his lips blue before they buried him. Thoughts circle like crows, picking at every whirring. You count tasks unfinished, mend the fence, patch the roof, appease the priest about missing tides. The mental list stretches longer than your waking hours ever could. Outside, an owl hoots. Rats scrape in the thatch above you. Somewhere distant, a dog barks twice and falls silent. These night sounds usually fade into background noise, but tonight they're needles jabbing you toward wakefulness. Your bladder protests you'll have to navigate the hut's obstacle course in pitch black to use the bucket. Stubbing a toe on the grinding stone, you think bitterly of manor houses where servants bring chamber pots to bedsides. Returning to the mattress, you accidentally knee a child in the ribs. They whimper but don't wake. Farm kids sleep like the dead. Adjusting your position sends fleas scattering across your legs. Eventually, exhaustion wins over discomfort. Sleep comes in ugly flashes, dreams of endless fields, screams from unseen mouths, the peculiar horror of realizing you forgot to plant an entire acre. Dawn will rip you back to consciousness in what feels like minutes. The church bell will clang with its usual lack of mercy. Your back will ache worse than today, your hands sorer, your stomach emptier. But for now, in this fragile pocket of stillness, you exist outside time. The straw prickles your cheek. The baby fusses in its sleep. A single-star win. The medieval peasant's life was an endless endurance test one most of us would fail within days. Imagine waking to backbreaking labor before sunrise, eating the same gruel for the 100th meal in a row, and collapsing onto flea-infested straw, knowing tomorrow brings the same. No painkillers for toothaches, no justice against lords, no escape from the relentless cycle of hunger and toil. Our ancestors survived this daily brutality through sheer stubbornness. Next time you gripe about slow Wi-Fi or cold coffee, remember, 8 centuries ago, your complaint might have been my lice are eating me alive. Perspective stings worse than flea bites.